Well, good evening, everyone, and I hope you're all well. Very much looking forward to this tasting in which we have 6 stunning individuals to tell you about their lovely whiskies and spirits. It's a really interesting tasting on many levels. I think certainly the first product we're going to be tasting for me is quite exciting in itself, as Murray will enlighten us very shortly. We're going to keep it quite tight because with these things, if you're not careful, they spiral out of control and you're still here at midnight and you've only got to the 3rd whiskey, which is obviously not where we want to be. And I'm sure you've had enough of beardy men online. So we're going to keep it to around 10-15 minutes per presenter. Now, at the bottom of your screen, if you've not used Zoom before, you should see in the middle a chat option. So what I would say is, and what I would encourage you to do, is ask questions through the chat, and I will then pose those to the presenter, and then we can move on. I won't unmute you until the very end. We may have a little Q&A session at the end. Just so that we're not throwing buns to bears and having a nightmare with too many people talking at the same time. So we'll keep it moving fairly swiftly. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce to you our first presenter, who is Murray from Lindor's Abbey. He's in the darkened room looking a bit dodgy in the corner there. I don't know if you can see him. I'm going to unmute you, Murray, just bear with me. Maybe that should be you. There we go.
Perfect. How you doing?
There we go. How are you doing, Murray? You okay?
I'm grand. Thank you so much. Yeah, and yourself?
Yeah, doing good. Doing good, man. Now, over to you. Tell us all about Lindor's Abbey, and what it's all about, and the Aqua Vitae.
Perfect. Well, it's probably a really nice wee place to start on this sort of little collection of like amazing malts and things that you've got coming ahead of you tonight. It's something super different. I'm not sure, obviously, I don't know who's with us tonight. So I'm going to treat everybody as if they've maybe never heard of Lindor's Abbey before, which is probably a very high chance because we are a very, very new whiskey distillery. So new, in fact, that we don't actually have a single malt whiskey yet. So we are just about to go into the realms of single malt whiskey very, very soon. We become of age on the 20th of December this year. It's when we'll actually have our first aged spirit being 3 years and a day old, because that's how old a spirit in Scotland legally has to be in order for it to be called a Scotch whisky. So what does a sort of young distillery like us do in the meantime of when you're waiting patiently for that sort of like first whisky to come out? Many would go into the realms of gin or vodka, maybe buying in a neutral grain spirit to make gin or vodka like that. But we want to do something a little bit different. So what our first spirit you have today is our Aqua Vitae. So Aqua Vitae means water of life in Latin, which later on in Scotland we started calling that spirit Ushkabi. And later after that, it became known as Ushki and then to whiskey. So the spirit we know as whiskey today, the very first name it was known as was Aqua Vitae in Scotland, which is the Latin, like I say. The reason we've decided to bring out this Aqua Vitae is because we are a very, very new whiskey distillery, but the wealth of history and heritage that goes on at Lindor's Abbey as a location takes us back to the very origins of Scottish distilling. So it goes all the way back to the date of 1494, which many of you may have heard from the stories of Friar John Corr and his 8 bowls of malt, the stories of like King James IV commissioning Friar John Corr of Lindor's Abbey to convert the 8 bowls of malt henceforth to make Aqua Vitae. And that's our first written reference there is to whiskey being made in Scotland. So, yeah, we are a very brand new place, but we're making whiskey again for the first time in about half a century. So just a little siesta that we've had there. So our Aqua Vitae is kind of a little bit of an ode to the origins of Scottish distilling. So very, very different from anything you're going to have else as your samples today. It's not whiskey. It's never been in a cask, so it's not had any oak influence at all. So what it is, it's our new make spirit, So this is what whiskey looks like before it's been in a barrel. So this is, you can't call it whiskey because it's not been aged. So we call it a new make spirit or a spirit drink. And this is what we class as like the DNA really of any different distillery. It's what makes everything very different from another for all of the many distilleries that we have around Scotland. Everybody starts off with their own version of their own new make that they make from, depending on like the type of barley they use, the length of the fermentation, the size of their stills, their line out, everything like that will depict what happens for this little guy here. We're very, very happy that this has been getting a lot of good attention of recent. It's recently just won from the World Whisky Awards as one of the best new makes and the best new make in Scotland at the minute. Doesn't mean to say that it's everybody's preference. Everybody's has got very different ones, but we're really happy that it's been sort of the DNA of our distillery has been sort of being given like a good chance for it before it's even gone into cask. So what we then do is we don't redistill this or barrel age it. We keep a little bit of it back and we rest in some local botanicals, some spices and fruits to create a really unique style botanical malt spirit. So it's unlike anything that's really on the shelves at the minute at all, like in any other shops, or is a very different like style of sort of first product that people are bringing out, that people would bring out from the distillery. So we use things that grow locally in the Abbey grounds, such as lemon verbena, sweet Sicily, cleavers, which is a fancy name for sticky willies, whatever gets stuck to your dog when it's running around. We use some Douglas fir and some other spices like cinnamon, ginger, caraway, and cardamom. And then it rests in some dates and raisins for a couple of days. So the whole cold steep maceration is around 7 or 8 days. And it's like I say, it hasn't touched a wooden cask at all. So all that color, the color you're getting there, is not had anything added to it. It's not had any added sweeteners. What it is, it's a little bit natural sweetness and color coming from the dates and raisins. So I know it's a little bit of a cliche note to sometimes say if you're in a whiskey tasting and perhaps you're tasting like sherried malts, a get out of jail free card is often to say I taste Christmas cake. And if you say that quickly, you're kind of maybe left alone, as that's maybe a wee thumbs up that you've got. It's an undeniable flavour of a kind of fruit loaf, Dundee cake, Christmas cakey kind of feel to it, because it has actually been steeping with dates and raisins and spices. So it's what we really want it to be is not trying to pretend that it's a malt whiskey. Think outside the box a little bit for that. So it's not, don't try and compare it to a 10-year-old malt or a 5-year-old malt, anything like that. It's something that is just unique and different for what it is, and perhaps you can use it as maybe an alternative to having a gin, something along those lines. So in my opinion, the flavor profile of it, if you're having a little look at the color, it obviously looks a little bit like a whiskey, but like I say, hasn't been aged, so it's not getting that from the oak. Smell is very spicy, very fruity. It's kind of like I almost like had an injection of maturation instead of it actually being in a cask itself. But the taste-wise, it's quite palatable by itself. It's a lovely little drink to have, maybe as like an aperitif style drink, but it really comes into its own as a mixing product. So it's a way of having a malt spirit drink without any stigma around mixing it. There's no words required like sacrilege or blasphemy or what would your dad think if he saw you doing that. We really wanted to kind of help break down those barriers a little bit about what you can do with a malt spirit drink. We know that in Scotland, we're the most famous country in the world for malt spirits, but we are one of the more rigid countries in the world when it comes to doing other things with a malt spirit, not just drinking it neat. Some people even get scared to ask for a splash of water in a bar if they're coming to Scotland for the first time. They don't know how they're going to be reacted to. So, but there's many countries around the world who drink malt spirits much more sessionably than we do in Scotland. If they might treat it more like a gin and tonic and have 4 or 5 of an evening, be it you male, female, whatever it is, it can be a bit of a longer, refreshing highball style drink. We're not trying to rethink the way that anybody drinks malt. You can drink malt however you like, but it's a nice little alternative to having a gin and tonic serve for the nice weather we're having just now. It's a beautiful wee drink to maybe have with a barbecue. I'm going to have mine tonight over ice with a little bit of ginger ale and a little bit of orange peel. And that's how, like, one of our sort of suggested serves. It's a fantastic wee one to have in cocktails, even like an espresso martini or a Negroni. And just, it's a little bit of a thinking outside the box kind of thing for a new spirit. But we are, like I say, we are coming up to that age of having our first single malt whiskies. Be getting released in 2021. And this is just like a nice little, it will always be part of our core range. Aqua Vitae is such an integral part as to why we even opened a distillery in the first place. But it will be something that we continue to do and exciting, and especially as an on-trade product, it's really, really wonderful. But we are getting so close now to entering the realms of single malt whiskey, which is really, really exciting. So if anybody has any questions about what we're doing, feel free to type them up, and if Eddie wants to shout some out, that'd be grand. And
thanks, Murray. There's certainly a lot of comments about what it would go well with. Some old fashions, Manhattans being suggestions. I think
absolutely
people are already starting to think about what they're going to put in it.
Yeah, well, it's just a great little thing. Again, I can't stress enough about, please don't compare it to, like, directly to like the other drams you have in your pack tonight. It's not, you can enjoy it or you can't enjoy it. It's one of those things, like, it's not something to say, oh, this is better or worse than this. It's a kind of open, like, be open to the suggestion of it. And it's an unbelievable experience. I'm sure it was with yourselves, actually, with the Whiskey Lounge last year in Edinburgh, that it's happened a few times at different festivals where people have come to a whiskey festival to try hundreds of different malts on the day, and the Aqua Vitae can often walk away as like the people's favourite. And that's something that I think about 5 years ago or so, you wouldn't expect at all, for somebody to come and try an unaged malt macerated with spices and fruits, to sort of come up against like 20, 30-year-old spirits, and people be able to walk away confidently and say, I actually like that for what it was. It doesn't have to be an age thing. So. Yeah.
I mean, for me, the interesting thing about the Aqua Vitae is having a minor interest in whiskey, as I do, is, obviously we hear of what whiskey used to be like before, we know, whiskey as it is in its modern form. And for me, it's quite interesting to taste a product which is probably not a million miles away from what people used to consider as whiskey. They would make it themselves from locally foraged, fruit, spices, herbs. So it's a nice kind of glimpse into the past of whiskey as much as anything else.
For sure. So yeah,
But what I'm quite interested in is, in terms of the whiskey that you are creating. Obviously, it's almost ready. But in terms of the house style of your actual single malt, what are you able to tell us about that?
Well, where we're located, we are in the lowlands. So we're in Fife in Newborough. So just on the banks of the River Tay, about 15-20 minute drive from Perth. So we are pretty much like the last town. Newborough is like the last little village in Fife before you venture into sort of Perth and Kinross territory. So we are, and another little interesting thing about the distillery, you can maybe see from the little picture behind me, just where the stills are, there's a little road that runs between the distillery itself and Abbey ruins, and that's part of the ancient boundary line between the lowlands and the highlands. So we distill literally 3 meters into the lowlands. So we have there was an idea of us being a very quintessential, light and floral lowland style. The lead consultant for the build of Lindors was the fantastic Dr. Jim Swan, who brought in lots of great ideas for our fermentation, distillation, and then our maturation process afterwards. He sadly passed away just the week before we opened Lindors, which was a real tragedy. But he gave us some fantastic things to play with at the time. Anybody, I'm sure, that's been involved in the distilling side of things with the distillery for a new one will always tell you that no matter what your idea is, before you actually start operating, the equipment will have its own little character to put in. So I think that our new make and our actual maturing malt is a little bit more complex than you might get from a quintessential lowland style, but perhaps it's fate that we are just right on that boundary line that we can almost suggest that it's happened for a reason, that we are a lowland but touching into perhaps the complexity of a Highland or Speyside malt. So.
Well, I mean, this is possibly something we can touch upon later with everyone else, but
absolutely,
what I think what's quite interesting is to get from everyone is, you know, how important people, distillers, think it is to stay within what is the traditional regional style, although we all know that that's not necessarily a valid thing anymore. But, you know, a lot of people still choose their whiskies on the premise that it's a lowland, a Highland, or a Speyside, or an Isla.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's interesting. Great. Listen, that was really good. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for listening, and hope everyone has got a little bit of information they maybe hadn't before. And I'll be here this evening if anybody wants to ask some more questions. So.
Absolutely, I'm sure there will be one or two more. So I'm just going to find our next contestant, Peter. Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you there?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, Eddie?
Yes, I can hear you, and I'm hoping that everyone can hear you. Is that a really elaborate three-dimensional virtual background you have?
No, I'm here in reality. This is the distillery. I can walk about, see.
Wow.
Lift some of the props.
So everyone, this is Peter Holroyd, the distillery manager at King's Barnes. And he's going to be talking to you about the dream to dram, and obviously about the beautiful distillery behind him. So on you go, Peter.
Yes, indeed. Fantastic. Well, first off, thanks a lot, Eddie, and to all the good folks at Whiskey Lounge. It's a fantastic cause as well. I know some money's going towards the Ben, which is a good shout. And so thanks for everyone turning up. Thank you also from Murray. I think that's a great way to start off a wee tasting with the Aqua Vitae. Mm-hmm. So yes, as Eddie said, my name's Peter Holroyd. I'm the distillery manager here at King's Barnes. We're based out in East Neuk of Fife in Scotland. So I thought that I would maybe give the tasting tonight actually from the distillery, because when I give a tasting, it's almost my natural environment. I feel quite comfortable here. And when I give a tasting, I quite like to take people around, or when I give a tour of the distillery, I take people around and I show them some of the different aspects of the distillery that are going to make a profound impact on the flavour that's hopefully going into your glasses as we speak. So I'm going to take you around, give you a quick show around of the distillery. It's all in the one room. I know we're running a tight ship here, so we better be on time. But before that, a little bit of history. So who are we? Why did we start? Where we did and when we did here in Fife? Well, we are a family-run, independently owned distillery, owned and operated by the Weems family, who have ancient ancestral links dating back hundreds of years to this very area, this very corner in Scotland. Crucially, before the Weems family got involved in the project, they actually had some experience and some knowledge in the Scottish whisky industry. So in 2005, William Weems set up Weems Malts, an independent whisky bottler and blender. So blending whiskies from all over Scotland, or bottling single casks from individual distilleries if the liquid was really up to the mark, if it was up to that. So between 2012 and 2014, when I joined the company, just as the stills were going in, that was when the distillery got built. Where we are, we're an old farmsteading, so an old farm building, and it was falling to rack and ruin. It had bags of character, bags of potential, but it was a state when we got to it. So we worked with architects and industry experts to bring the place up to scratch and give it a new lease of life as a distillery. But not just that, have tasting rooms, a shop, cafe, the works. The same as what quite a lot of these new distilleries are doing. So I think I'll maybe take you around and show you some of the aspects that make us us. First off, we've got the mash tun over here. This is where we're going to make we're going to mash the milled malted barley with 3 series of hot water, a very traditional setup. But the point I want to point out here is we've got a wee sight glass there. So our mash man, Gareth Reed, shout out to Gareth, is going to be keeping a very close eye on that, because we're looking to achieve a very clear, bright colour of wort, that sugary liquid that's coming out of the bottom of the mash tun. If you get a nice clear colour of wort, then that's going to encourage kind of quite an estery, fruit-rich style of whiskey. When you start a distillery, the first thing you're going to want to do is really say, okay, what is the house style? Just as Murray was saying there, I love the fact that we're talking about distillery DNA, because that's where it starts off. So right through the full process, raw materials to the way the plant is engineered to the way you process everything, it's all geared towards driving as much kind of fruit-rich character as possible into it. We knew from the outset we wanted to create quite an elegant, fruity sort of floral style. So typically a lowland style, if you wanted to call it that, and I know we're going to go down a rabbit hole later on talking about regions. So we knew what we wanted to achieve. So every aspect of the production process was kind of geared towards targeting that. The last thing you would ever do when you start a distillery is just cobble together all the pipe work, fire up the stills, press the green button, and then see what comes out the other end. You've got to be very meticulous about each aspect. The next stage that kind of gives us a little bit of unique character, I think, is in the fermentation, which I'll just take you over to now. So we opted to use 2 strains of yeast. We opted to use one that's been used for decades by distilleries. It's called Anchor, and it's been used for good reason, and that's because it's very efficient in what it does. It creates a lot of alcohol, it metabolizes all those sugars, but it also gives a good rounded flavor profile as well. The other yeast that we use, and it's a 50-50 ratio, is Fermentation, which is a French yeast. And that one is really the big fruit producer in our whiskey. So the blend of the 2 yeasts, because they both contribute something different, is going to give us a bit of balance and complexity before we even get to distillation, where those terms are used more interchangeably. Long fermentations as well. And what you've got in this is wash, about 8% volume, and you need to make sure that all the distillery character is in there. To my mind, this is one of the most important parts of the distillery, is making sure that you have character in the wash, because the stills are only going to condense that. So you need to make sure that you're starting out with something that's got the right quality that you're looking for your particular distillery. Very kind of wheat beer like, I'll be honest with you. If many of you have tried wash at a distillery, I remember when I went to Kilholman, I remember I tried some of your stuff, Anthony, some of your wash straight out the wash back. Bit of smoke to it, so everyone's different, but lovely kind of fruity character to it. Quite long fermentations, so the yeast has got plenty of time to make as much flavour as possible, and you even get some of the wild yeasts and the lactic acid bacteria making an impact on flavour as well there. The next part is distillation. So once in a wash still and second time in the spirit still. Very traditional double copper pot still distillation. And it's all pretty old school stuff on that side, I'll be honest with you. Manual steam valves and everything else, so we can be pretty immediate about what we want to do. But we take a very high spirit cut point, so we're targeting all the kind of lightest congener, the lightest flavours, and we're leaving behind anything that's got any more sort of leathery or meaty characteristics to it. We're leaving that behind. Moving swiftly on to maturation. So what we've got here is Dream to Dram, and this is our flagship malt. It is natural colour, non-chill filtered, and 46% strength. So in the nose, again, quite sweet. I think you get almost a sweet shop element out of our whiskies, like a banana foam almost. A little bit of tropical fruit as well, maybe a little bit of pineapple. And in the palate, it's sweet up front, I find, and then it morphs into just a little bit of sourness. There's a wee bit of summer berries in there. So the cask makeup that went into that is 90% first fill bourbon. So first fill bourbon casks, I think, work really well with our distillery. It displays the distillery character really nicely. You get a lovely tropical fruit note from it, that lovely vanilla rounding everything off. Because you're starting out with just pure distillery character, that DNA, the spirit, the new make spirit. That is, it's distillery character. There's no hiding behind any oak there. So if you ever get the chance to try it at separate distilleries, give it a go. You can sometimes try new make spirits on too, but it works really nicely in bourbon, putting our base into bourbon. But the other 10%, you got 90% first fill bourbon. The other 10% is shaved, toasted, recharred casks from Portugal. So these have been red wine casks, barriques, 225 litres capacity, and then they've been shaved on the inside and toasted and recharred. And that's just made like a new layer of active carbon in the inside. And there's a lot of life left to give in these. And the whiskey that comes out of these casks is pretty wild. It's really sticky. It's really rich. And if bourbon casks are the backbone of Dream to Dram, then the STR, these shaved toasted recharred casks, are the glue that holds it all together. And I mean that almost literally. That's a sample of an STR cask whiskey. And you can see how dark it is. It really is. It's like plum wine. The flavour you get out of them, out of the single cask STRs, is kind of akin to ex-sherry maturation. So you get all those lovely dried fruit notes. I pick up a lot of damsons and plums in it as well, but it's incredibly rich. So that just adds, you can see from the colour of that, just 10% of that into the blend there is going to give it a touch of richness. It's going to give it a lot of that sour mid palate, the summer berry thing that you find. I think this is a lovely dram to have in the summer. Actually, it's one for now, Dream to Dram, and it's really about establishing the distillery character and letting people know what the house style is, which is incredibly important for any new distillery. I think is to be able to say this is the character of the distillery going forward. I would also say we've got it in our shop now as well. A shameless plug: you can get £5 off it if you join our mailing list as well. But I really hope that you've enjoyed this very short tour and enjoyed the dram as well.
Well, Peter, I have to say hats off and thank you for making the effort to come to us this evening from the
my pleasure.
Words can't express my disappointment in all the other presenters. I'm just kidding. I love you all. Just one or two questions, Peter, for you. A couple from, one from me, one from a customer. Possibly a difficult question to ask or answer, rather, is are you aiming eventually for an age-stated whiskey? I guess the question behind that is, how much importance do you bestow on the age statement as opposed to the non-age statement? And on the back of that, and this is almost impossible to answer, what do you think the perfect age of Kingsbarns will be?
Good second question there. So yeah, we are looking at putting an age on our whiskies. For the moment, we've really given Dream to Dram, I think it's time, given it a little bit of time to in the marketplace by itself. But we are certainly looking at putting an age statement on it. We've got some very exciting plans this year, actually, for later on in the year, for releasing some stuff that we've never put out before. We've got a lot of experimentation going on as well. So we've got over 20 different cask types now that we're filling into. But by and large, we're filling what we know works, which is mostly the first fill bourbons.
I was going to ask
In
you
terms of
about.
the perfect age, sorry, on you go.
No, no, I was just going to quickly ask about the first fill bourbons, because obviously they're very vociferous and will give you a lot of character quite quickly. Are you filling it any into second fill or even third fill for future prosperity? Because obviously at some stage, you know, you're going to reach
Definitely.
an age where maybe first fill is a little bit too aggressive for you.
No, you're absolutely right. The last thing you want to do is put all your hard work and effort into making a decent new make spirit and then bludgeon it to death with oak. So for having it in for a cask for too long. So no, we're certainly looking at. We've done some second fill. I think we've done 1 or 2 third fill as well. So we're being quite careful about that. It is a family run business, and Isabella Weems, one of my colleagues, she has a hand in selecting all the casks as well, all the wood. You know, it's a hands-on business for her as well.
What a shame.
So going on to your good question, what's the ideal age in my opinion? I'm really looking forward to seeing some of our whiskey out at 7 and 8 years old. I think it's still got just enough. It's got enough weight in it to be able to carry forward. You know, we've got a filling plan going right the way up to 20, 25 years henceforth. But we are, I think 7 and 8 years is going to be quite interesting for us. I think that's going to be where you're going to start to see it become a little bit more special. I think the whiskey can, you know, it stands up to being a youngster. You know, what you're drinking now is 3 years old. We're very upfront about that. You know, we're a young distillery, and it is young whiskey. You can maybe touch a little bit of like that tiny bit of ginger syrup in the finish. It gives away its youth slightly, but it's by no means harsh. You know, it's quite a well-rounded, balanced dram, I think.
Oh, well, I mean, without blowing hot air up your proverbial, I think it's exactly that. It's fresh, it's zesty. It's not obviously over complex yet because it hasn't had that time to develop, but there's nothing unpleasant about it at all. It's got enough sweetness and and balance. Is there any of the STR casks in the Dream to Dram?
Yes. So we've got it's 90% first fill bourbon casks go into it, and 10% shaved toasted recharred. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done a couple of single cask STRs as well. So we've done one so far. Yeah. But as I say, it's fairly wild whiskey. I know some of our contemporaries have done them as well, and they're interesting.
Do you think that might even put hair on my head?
Give it a go, Eddie. Give it a go.
Well, I'm game if you are. Okay. Listen, Peter, that was fascinating, and thanks again. Really, really lovely to see you in the still room there.
No bother at all. It's my pleasure.
I'm going to rush on over to Mark at Wolfburn before we get too late. But thanks again, Peter, and we'll speak to you again in a bit. Okay.
Thanks. Cheers.
Mark.
How the devil are you?
I'm doing very well, my friend. How are you doing? Are you enjoying?
Yeah, brilliant.
You enjoying the tasting so far?
Yeah, it's been great, and it's great, obviously, meeting up with these guys because you see them on the circuit and at shows and festivals. So,
well, you used to see them on the circuit.
Yes, yeah. This virtual world's great, especially being right in the still house. I can't give you that treat. Welcome to my living room.
Are you sure that it's not a virtual background of your living room and you are actually in the still house?
You know this, yeah. I wouldn't put it past myself. I can get up to a bit of mischief, I must admit. So.
Indeed. Well, listen, I must give you your dues and give you some time to talk to everyone about your lovely brand and the whiskey. So I'll let you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Eddie. Welcome, folks. Mark Westmoreland, Global Ambassador for Wolfburn Whiskey. Do a bit of sales management, a bit of trained assassin as well. I'll do anything for the company. We're based in Thurso, so we're the most northerly whiskey distillery on the mainland of the UK. Now, I know Eddie's given me some co-host rights, and if I can get my jobby fingers to work, I'll maybe share you some of the sites round about the distillery as well. So Thurso in Caithness, it's the flow country. Wolfburn, the new Wolfburn distillery has been up and running since 2013. The old Wolfburn distillery, 1821 to about 1877, on and off, I don't know, Eddie, if this is working. I shall ask you very much if it's still coming up for everybody.
Yeah, you
This is just a view of the flow country. Caithness is flat as a pancake or flat as something else, which I probably can't say at the moment. These are the lovely views that are right above the distillery from drone. So 1821 to about 1877, that was the first Wolfburn distillery. Built farmyard distillery, producing about 120,000 litres, 125,000 litres actually per annum. So it was the largest distillery in Caithness. How we know that? We don't have any records of the distillery, we don't have any pictures or any recipes, but we do have tax records. So yeah, it just goes to show you death and taxes, the only two things certain in life. So we can see from the tax records. So that looks out on the Scrabster, where the clouds are, that's over to Orkney, over to Dunnet Head, the most northerly point on the mainland as well. A brand new distillery build in 2013. We approached Forsyths, the famous Rothes coppersmith. They built our entire distillery from scratch on a blank canvas within 6 months, which was unheard of. But they wanted to use us as their guinea pig. They wanted to use us as a blueprint so they could go anywhere in the world and say we can build a distillery from scratch using all their subsidiary companies as well. And even our owners, Andrew and Harry, they're ex-Royal Marines, they went over to Kilchoman and they worked with Anthony for a week or so just to get the gen. So I've been asked to thank Anthony direct from Andrew and Harry for that opportunity again, because Anthony, bless him, he was very honest in his outlook, what he would do and what he wouldn't do as well, which was great for these guys because they worked with Forsyths, and then we have this modern, brand new, efficient distillery. But we're trying to do it the traditional way as well. These are our modern dunnage warehouses. Just at the top, 2 warehouses, we've extended them over the last year. We're slowly getting some business back in because, again, we were just on the retail in 2016 with our first expressions just over 3 years old, much the same as King's Barnes as well. It was important for us as making non-age statement whiskies. We wanted to make the whisky as fruity, as floral, as light and vibrant as possible. Again, with the process, a lovely clear wort, long fermentation times, and a nice gentle copper contact, not filling the stills too full. So this is our bottling plant as well. We hand bottle everything on site. So we fill 4 bottles at a time. We pass them to the next guy. They put the top on. It's an oak cap. Then the tin sleeve goes on. Then we do have a small machine that puts the label on. We build the boxes, we build the cartons, and away we go. So it's very labor intensive, but we keep control over all the process. So it means that we have, we keep our standards high, and it means that nobody else can come in and actually make a hash of it. If something goes wrong, it's our fault. But hopefully nothing's gone wrong yet, and I haven't jinxed it. Nothing will go wrong in the future. There's the famous Wolfburn. This is where we draw our water from. This is a natural spring that rises in the moors, and the old distillery was named after the Wolfburn water. We wanted something as well that would relate to the Wolfburn water, so we had the sea wolf, the mythical beast on my chest here. It sort of reflects the sea where we are, because we're a coastal town, Thurso, and the wolf where we draw our water from, the Wolfburn. So this is the mythical sea wolf as well. Quite an iconic motif, and it's quite eye-catching at shows and festivals. We're not a Glen or a Ben, or we're nothing overly Scotified or tartaned about us, I suppose. We want to create a beautiful, phenomenal spirit, but we want to give it the correct vehicle and the correct packaging and brand to get it to market as well. What other slides have we got? There you go, there's the money shot. The wash still on the left, and our pot still on the right. Again, just as King's Barnes, nice traditional hand-controlled steam. And if you look out the back on the tree line there, that's where the Wolfburn runs as well. So that's where we get our direct water source. We take in 57,000 litres. Just to the left there, we have an old Capardonnach washback, which contains our spring water tank. And to the next to that, we've got another Capardonnach washback, which is our effluent tank. We try not to get them mixed up for obvious reasons. But it's a nice nod to have something from an old closed distillery in a brand new distillery, because you're paying homage to the craftsmen, and you're paying homage to the skillful masters of the past as well. Team photo, probably how my gallery is set up. To the far right is our current distillery manager, Ian Kerr. He came up in 2013 with Shane Fraser from Glenlivet. Shane Fraser came up from Glenfarclas. And together for 3 years, it was just the two of them on site producing spirit and rolling it into 2 warehouses. Shane left 2019 after 6 years, and Ian stepped up to the plate as well. So for us, it's great. There isn't any change in cask selection. There isn't any change in flavour or profile. These two guys were thick as thieves together, building the spirit from 2013 to 16. So it's just a natural progression, and we keep the consistency, which is superb as well. So tonight's dram is our Langskip. Now, this was our 4th core expression. This is a 58% first fill bourbon casks only, and these were our oldest casks that we had in 2018. So these were 5-year-old casks and some 4-year-old as well. 58%, we wanted it to be a fiery dram. We wanted to give you a good slap about the face, but with a nice warm cuddle at the back of it, so nothing too aggressive. And 58 degrees is where Thurso sits on the map, so it's a really nice touch to where we are. Named after the Viking longship, Thurso, Thorstown, the Viking settlement. So again, we're paying homage to our history and our heritage and our community as well. I always get a lovely sort of salinity. I always get a lovely sort of rich green apple or pear syrup from our new make spirit, our cleric. And then the maturation in the bourbon casks give it just that lovely sort of sweet caramel that, you know, I can take this and I can remember eating slabs of Stollen cake in Germany. So that lovely rich marzipan, that lovely sort of deep fruit cake as well, with that lovely sort of lingering sort of nutty almond finish and that lovely sort of smooth caramel at the end. So cheers, guys, from everybody at Wolfburn. Short and sweet. I know there's questions coming in. I did have some tasting notes as well for people, but again, these are very subjective. You're tasting your flavours your own. So what we say is, if you're happy, give us some feedback. Tell us what you think, what you taste, what it is on the nose, what it is on the palate. If you're not confident enough, who cares? Just enjoy your whiskey. Just go for it, guys. Don't be shy. There's our mythical sea wolf guarding outside the distillery. And we always say at Wolfburn, fortune favours the brave. So again, thanks very much for the opportunity. And if you do have any questions, and hopefully Eddie will come in and save my voice for a wee bit when I can have a dram.
Does it take 10 minutes to lose your voice? You'll go far. Thanks for that, Mark. Yeah, there have been 1 or 2 questions. I've got a couple myself. I must admit, I haven't tried too many Wolfburns, so I was quite looking forward to this evening. I'm kind of saving myself for you and the Langfeld. And I find it's very, very nice. It's very muscular. It's got a quite spicy, peppery. Yeah,
and even at 58%, it's not overly aggressive. It's not got that like really harshness that you'd expect.
Yeah,
it's very mellow. I think, but I'm totally biased. I'll be honest with you.
Of course. Well, you know, that's what you're paid to do. You know? I'm sure it's not. You don't have to be paid too much to say that. To be honest.
No, it's my hometown. I was born and bred there, Eddie. So you know, cut me in half. I'll probably have Thurso, Scotland, like a stick of rock, and bleed Wolfburn by now. I think. I
don't doubt it one little bit. So I suppose my question, coupled to one of the customers' questions, is when the guys were first pulling Wolfburn together, and obviously there was an existing distillery just across the way, were there any records? I doubt obviously there was any whiskey left from that period, but were there any records existing?
No, the only
style of that?
Yeah, the only things that we could find were the old flagstones, the old Caithness flags where the distillery was.
Right.
As a farm distillery, it would work for a few years, then go into rack and ruin, then be started again, still on site. The only thing we got was some tax records and some voters' roll records, which would show the stillman or the distilleryman and a warehouseman. Yeah. But we're only producing 120,000 litres a year as well, so it's a very small operation. And again, I have to do the fist punch. We are fiercely independent. And again, that isn't a political statement. There's 4 guys on the stills and there's 12 people in the whole company.
Yeah, yeah. So sort of leading on from that question is, because obviously there wasn't any record of what they were distilling or the style of whiskey they were distilling at the old distillery. What led you to decide, or the whiskey maker to decide the style of Wolfburn? Because obviously your nearest mainland distillery would be Pulteney, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 21 miles away. Yeah, from us.
And therefore, and then a little bit further south, you've then got the Balblairs and Morangies and so on.
Yeah,
and obviously Clynelish in between. So this, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but
what would be the sort of the North Highland signature that was?
Well, yeah,
we were trying to
what were you aiming for?
Yeah, without any records, without any recipes. Shane Fraser, bless him, he was given 2 instructions coming up from Glenfarclas. Make a beautiful spirit of your own, which is going to be sort of light and fruity in a typical sort of Highland-esque fashion, and make it so we can sell it relatively young, because we didn't do gin, we didn't do vodka. We wanted Wolfburn to be synonymous with a quality single malt, which it is 7.5 years in. So we had, for 3 years, we had no revenue coming in whatsoever.
Yeah.
So he nailed it. He really nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting model that these days is quite unique. I mean, I know actually Anthony at Kilhoman, I don't believe that he fell for the gin and vodka thing as well. But, on the flip side, you understand it, because building a distillery is crazy, whichever way you look at it. It's a real crazy thing to do, because it's not a money spit.
If you've got £4 million in your back pocket, let's meet after the show and let's get our heads together.
Yeah. I wish I did. But no, I mean, it's really interesting, and I definitely look forward to the day I can get up north and come and see you guys up there.
Yeah, there's plenty on the way up and there's plenty on the way down, depending on which way you go as well.
Exactly.
Ben, charity as well from me, Eddie. We'll stick another £100 in the kitty. I know you've got over £400 raised for Ben as well, so stick another 100 in from us. And if you want to choose a willing victim from your participant list through random, we'll send them a Wolfburn goodie bag as well, just to keep them on the hook.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Just send it to me.
You can always pick yourself.
Would I do something like that? Of course I would. Just a quick question from someone you might know in the audience who's managed to wheedle his way in, Mr. Runev.
Now it's like going to the pictures as a kid. Somebody would pat the fire door and they would all pile in. So I think he's managed to get in that way.
Exactly.
I'll let him off.
But the question he has is quite an interesting one. He says, "Are you smaller than Kilhoman?" And I would say that you definitely look smaller than Kilhoman.
We probably are like Kilhoman. They just put their Stetton's stillhouse on, so they're sub 500,000 litres, I think. I'll be corrected by Anthony, no doubt, 480 or something. It's all about where you start and how big you want to get. We've got capacity to do an extra, we're only doing 6 mashes a week, so we could do 8 mashes a week without any increase in build. So it means that we could put an extra 40,000 litres on without trying. But with 4 guys on the stills, they're working a couple of shifts a day. We're not working weekends. We're not working through the night. So again, that work-life balance that the guys have, and the motivation that they have to come to their work as well, because it's a nice relaxed pace. Thurso, Caithness, the folk from there, they're so laid back, they're horizontal. myself included.
I think I would fit in fine, Mark.
Brilliant.
Listen, Mark, that was really good. Thank you. And the whiskey is undoubtedly delicious, and I'm glad I saved myself.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Cheers, guys.
No problem at all. So we're going to move on now to, I have to remind myself, to Helen. Helen, I'm going to find Helen. Where are you? She disappeared. No, there she is.
Hello.
Helen, are you there?
I'm here. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you enjoying the tasting so far?
I really am, actually. I've never tried some of these before, so it's been really good.
Yeah.
And I like all the stories about why they were built, and
yeah, exactly.
around the distillery was pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we see that it's still light up there at Strathern. It's impressive.
Beautiful. I wish I was really there.
Well, it's the next best thing, isn't it? And having a glass of it. So, listen, Helen, I hope you don't mind me saying that you were kind of thrown in the deep end a little bit here by powers that be, and that you're going to do your very, very best to give us as much information as possible. But we'll go very easy on you and just enjoy the whiskey. So you take it away.
I'm struggling to hear you, Eddie. Sorry, it's really noisy. A really noisy motorbike just went past. It was really noisy.
Well, I was just saying that you know everything and anything about Strathern, and
I wish I did.
No, anyway, listen, Helen, you
I tell them.
You take it away. I've already told them that you've been thrown in the deep end, so just don't worry about it. Let's go. Yeah.
So Zach, who's our distillery manager, is unfortunately at the moment on annual leave, and our brand ambassador has been on furlough, and he's not due to be back until Monday. So I've been really put in the deep end, and I actually joined this company in the middle of furlough. So I joined 3 months ago, and I've not been to the distillery yet myself, and everything I've done has been virtual. So this is kind of like the new real life to me, seeing everybody on screens. But I have been given a crash course in Strathern, and I will do my very best for everyone this evening. So Strathern started, it's classed as a micro distillery. It's actually a very, very small distillery in Perthshire, and it was started in 2013. And I can see lots of questions coming up. And it was actually purchased by Douglas Lane in October 2019. So I actually work for Douglas Lane & Co now. And at the moment, well, before lockdown and currently now still, there's a lot of work going on there. So normally, if I place my hand like this is normally the still house, but that may change when we actually get to see it. So there's a lot of work happening there. So Douglas Lane bought it in October 2019, and that was a massive milestone, because actually what it meant, it was the first time in the history Douglas Lane became not only a blender and independent bottler, it was now a distiller also. So this is this is what the bottle of Strathern looks like, if you can all see it throughout my backdrop. So for a very young spirit, so it's non-age stated, it's actually very rich in its colour. It's very red, like almost, dark mahogany. So it's got a lovely, lovely rich colour to it. And the objective, actually set out by Caroline, was to create a classic Highland style single malt while continuing to experiment and innovate alongside our strong wood policy. And also to ensure the longevity of quality spirit at Strathern. The main objective is to challenge the idea that age is superior and the overriding crucial factor in Scotch whisky. So that's where we are. Interestingly, in the production process itself, a slow mash normally, so the slow mash, which we spoke about earlier, actually, to get as much fermentable sugar out of the barley as possible, takes around 5 hours, the Strathern. And the fermentation we actually do for 4.5 days, which is around 108 hours, and the standard being 58 hours. So we really spent a long time doing that to absorb some of the off flavours, which now becomes the wash. It is poured into virgin European oak casks, 100 litres, and then it is, after some time, placed into 50-litre ex-Oloroso sherry casks, which is why it's got this beautiful, rich colour to it. And it spends some time there before we then decanter it. But it's not widely available. The only place it's available at the moment is actually on our website. So we don't actually sell this anywhere or to any of our customers. It's just purely available online. So for the taste, for the smell first, the profile. So it's a dry oak style, balanced by a caramel, touch of honey. And then everyone's got their own, I completely agree with what Mark says, everyone has their own taste, but I think you get a really lovely, strong taste of summer berries and cocoa, and that sherry really comes through. And there's a lovely long linger of butterscotch and oat biscuits. I really like it. I don't really know what else to say because it's so new. I mean, this is batch 001, which we actually have.
That's all good, Helen. It's all good. It's quite unique among the selection this evening in that it's very heavily reliant, as you said, on sherry casks.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting.
ABV, apologies, I've just seen that. It's 40, I think it's 46.5%. 6.6%, sorry, 46.6%.
Yes. It does say in the pack.
Yeah.
Lazy sods. Read your pack. Apart from Port Anthony, I'm sorry I didn't manage to get your pack to Isla in time. I've completely forgotten that couriers take a lifetime to get stuff to Isla. But anyway, so Port Anthony's the only one who isn't getting to taste all the whiskies. I'll make it up to you, Anthony. You know, but yeah, so like I was saying, it's really interesting to taste something so young that has been fully matured in ex-sherry casks,
non-chill filtered. No caramel added. It's incredible. I think the colour that comes from it. And
couple of questions. And just be told.
Yeah. If I don't know it, I will come back. Give me your email address. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is 3 years old. I see that question.
So that is
definitely
yeah.
3 years old.
Okay. What was one of the other questions? Was there any whiskey being matured in anything other than virgin or sherry maturation?
I've missed an important thing out. So actually, you were speaking about, my other colleagues were speaking about capacity. So the capacity at Strathern is currently 40,000 litres. So it is really small per annum. But we're raising this to 120,000 litres with all the works that's happening, the new stills, new washbacks and boilers, etc. And there's also going to be a new visitor centre. So it'd be really nice if some of these people in due course can come up and actually see it and try it for themselves, which would be great. But yeah, as true to Douglas Lane style, we're actually experimenting with new casks. We're already filled in red wine casks. So we've got Rioja and Burgundy and Port casks at the moment, currently under experimentation.
Great. Okay, so there's plenty to look forward to in the years to come. Nick Runev says there's 2 in stock on douglaslang.com. So if you like it, you better be
really quick.
Fast.
If I can get more, I will.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Helen, I think you did really well. I'm not just saying that, and well done for trying as hard as you can.
Sorry.
Zero in stock.
You get me their email addresses. If anybody wants it, if you give Eddie your email address, I'll try and get you a link to some more.
Great. I think you'll possibly sell some. It's a real revelation, and looking forward to tasting it as it develops.
Yeah.
And thank you for your effort.
Thank you.
And I will find our next host. You can mute yourself now, Helen, if you like.
Thank you. Bye.
Speak to you in a bit. Johnny, Earth calling Johnny McMillan.
Good evening. Are you well?
You know how I am.
Yeah, that bad. Jesus, right.
I'm okay. Okay, I'm all right. It's good to see you, actually. Johnny,
I wish I could say the same.
Well, you could, but it wouldn't be true, would it? So Johnny, as you may have guessed, I know and have known for some years. Some credit me with the folly which was actually bringing Johnny into the whiskey industry. Personally, I think...
Are you trying to tell me something about my fatherhood here? I mean, should I get a DNA test?
I think it might be for the best.
Yeah, my facial hair growth suggests that you are not my father, Eddie.
No, definitely not. But anyway, so Johnny is now. What's your current role at Berry Brothers, Johnny? What?
Good question. That's a good question. So my official role is assistant reserve spirits manager. Doug wanted to call me assistant reserve spirits executive, so we could shorten it to ARS, which tells you a lot about MacIver. But basically, I buy casks for Berry Brothers and Rudd to bottle in independent bottling range. But then because I'm a real, like yourself, chronic, like final stage whiskey nerd, I kind of get drawn into everything. So I do, you could call me sort of Daft Mill brand manager. If I worked for Maxim, I would be the brand manager. But there isn't really a brand manager. So I do a lot of Daft Mill stuff. Yes. A bit of Glenrothes, High Coast, anything whiskey and Berry Brothers I kind of get drawn into.
Yeah. So I suppose what should be pointed out here is that Berry Brothers and Rudd, which is a very historical wine and spirit merchant, possibly the oldest in Europe, if not definitely the oldest in Europe or in the world, is also
the world, but
it is also the distributor of Daft Mill in the UK.
Globally, yeah. So we have the it's called Global Distribution and Marketing Partnership for Daft Mill. So we kind of spoke to Daft Mill shortly after I joined, and Daft Mill is a one-man band, literally. It is owned by Francis Cuthbert, who I feel like a very poor imitation standing in for him. There are many people I'm happy to speak in place of in the whiskey industry, but Francis is not one of them. And he's a wonderful man. He's very unassuming. He's completely uncommercial. He has real integrity. He's just the most authentic guy in the whiskey industry, and he's amazing. But what he is not really is a marketeer. And I don't think Daft Mill really had any desire or real idea about how they were going to bring their whiskey to market. And that's kind of what Berry Brothers do. So we kind of worked with them to create the brand, to sort of go from cask to bottle. And then, we've got a sales team in place, so they kind of work through us in all different markets, basically. So to talk about the distillery then, and sort of move away from the berry side, for me, Daft Mill kind of almost is one guy. It's Francis Cuthbert. He owns the distillery, and he is also the farmer. So him and his brother own it, and there's two businesses on the estate. One's a quarry, which I understand makes quite a lot of money. And about 10 years ago, Francis, who runs the farming side of things, basically just about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, kind of decided he wanted to have a distillery. But he runs a farm, and that is his main business. So when the farm is busy, so sort of spring, harvest time, like right now, the reason Francis is not here is he is currently sitting in a combine harvester. He is growing the barley that he then distills. And then in summertime, and summer and winter, when the farm is quiet, Francis will then go and distill. And that is actually a really super traditional way of producing whiskey. Long before the kind of commercialization or the whiskey industry, it was really a way of like preserving barley. So if you're a farmer and you've kind of grown enough barley to eat and to sort of pay your landlord, you'd want to preserve it in a way that you could also potentially sell it as well. And obviously the first thing you do is brew it, but that's kind of half the story. So you would then distill it. So the production cycle at Daft Mill, you know, it's not like a marketing gimmick. He's not doing this to kind of put something cool in the back of the bottle. It is literally the same way as they were doing it originally, in that he is just too busy to distill. He is the only guy that works in the distillery. So 100% of what Francis distills is his own barley. He's never bought in barley. And if he could, he'd be getting it malted in Fife as well. And it was until 2006. It's malted in Crisp, which is in Isla, which is more or less Fife, let's face it, Clackmannanshire. There's any text reviews, that's nice of you. And then the other good thing about Daft Mill, or you know, fortunate thing, and they are a privileged position, is that, you know, as I say, the quarry is a kind of supporting business to the distillery. So unlike basically every other new distillery, bar one or two, they were able to really bide their time and not release any whiskey until they really felt it was ready. And for years, people were asking Francis, you know, when are you going to release your whiskey? When are you going to release your whiskey? And he'd always kind of give the slightly wry answer of, well, when I think it's ready. But I think the truth behind that was when I get around to doing it. And that was kind of, I feel, the beauty of the Berries partnership for him, was that, you know, we kind of we took the pain out of coming to market. So, you know, Daft Mill didn't have to do a gin, they didn't have to do future cask sales, or they didn't have to sell young whiskey. And, you know, that's absolutely not a criticism of those who've done that, because that is a commercial necessity for most. But their first whiskey was released when it was 12 years old. So the whiskey we've got this evening is a 2007, and it's the winter batch. So I'd say Daft Mill distill in two distinct seasons, summer and winter. The production is more or less identical. The difference is that the wort is recycled one extra time in summer. So, I mean, it's a clear wort anyway, but it's kind of extra clear in summer. Whether that makes a difference in the final spirit. In truth, I've tried tasting a whole load of them blind, and I haven't got it right in terms of sorting 5 and 5, winter and summer. I generally get it right, but I think the summer is slightly fruitier. But then the recycled wort in summer is maybe counteracted by the fact that the still house is colder in winter, so you get more reflux. I don't know. But it is two very distinct seasons, and that's kind of how we release the whiskey as well, in summer and winter. And then through various quirks of production, which I won't bore you with, there's actually all it's put into batches as well. So each summer and winter has 4 batches of about 1,500 bottles, one for the UK, one for Europe, one for Asia, and one for America. So if you want to collect Daft Mill, you're screwed, basically. It's very, very difficult to collect, because they don't even say which batch number they are on them. So it's quite tricky to collect that one. But this one is all first fill bourbon barrels. And I should say Daft Mill's production is minuscule as well. You know, if you're sort of talking about thousands of litres of alcohol, Daft Mill will be between sort of 15 and 20,000 LPA, so very, very small. To put that into layman terms, that's about 100 casks a year. And I think there's one year, which I think actually is 2007, there was only 70, 80 casks laid down. So very, very, very little. And the vast majority of it is first fill bourbon barrels, which I think goes nicely with Daft Mill's character. There's a few sherries in there as well. And there's some, we've just sort of bottled the latest tranche of single casks. There's a ex Pedro Jimenez hogshead coming through Berry Brothers with the ballot going live later this month, and it is really good. Character-wise for Daft Mill, the first time I went around the distillery, I remember Francis opened the spirit receiver, and there's just this big waft of like fresh peaches and cream. And I don't know if that experience has always put that suggestion in my head, but if someone asks me what is Daphne's distillery character, I always go back to this sort of like really intense, slightly overripe peach with a kind of buttery note as well. And I think that comes through in basically all the releases. Francis would say, he's aiming for a kind of lowland, fruity style. But then Francis wouldn't say much at all, really. I've already given you probably the biggest sales pitch anyone's ever going to give Daphne. Francis does not do that kind of thing. That's about that, really. Eddie, I hope you have some really insightful and erudite questions to spur me into further comment.
To spur you into life, more like.
Yeah, sorry, was that a bit sleepy? I've been playing with the twins all day, and they're I should say they're my daughters. And I'm pretty knackered, to be honest.
Yeah, no, don't worry. That was great. Thanks. There's a lot of comments. I think a lot of people really like this, and like you say, it's like the juice you get out of tinned peaches. It's just super fruity and lovely. But questions and comments surrounding
price seems to be the main thing.
Prices, yeah. So
yeah.
First question amongst those was, what do you think about the silly auction prices that Daft Mill seems to command at the moment?
Yeah, I mean it's a bugger really, because we've tried to do a few things to stop that. I mean, the main thing we did was I'm taking full credit for this idea, was the Whiskey Bars of Scotland cask. So it was a single cask, limited outrun, but it was only available in bars, and it went to the bars with the name of the bar written on it. And we told those bars, we got them all to agree, if you're taking stock of this, you are not selling these by the bottle. It has to be by the dram. So it's kind of the unflippable bottle. And then obviously in lockdown, we allowed the bars to sell one bottle each, and they all went for $4,000. But it's a very, very tricky thing. We try to keep the prices reasonable. The upcoming single casks are about £150 RRP for 12-year-old whiskey or so. If anyone has any ideas about how you can combat flippers, I would love to know. We can't sell the bottles with the capsules broken. It was something we looked into. Say people queue outside Berry Brothers, and the first 100 people have the opportunity to buy the bottles with a capsule open for a cut price, but it's illegal to do that. In terms of small bottles, we did look into doing small bottles as well, but firstly, it's a lot of faff and a lot of expense, and we kind of felt like even if you're then going into like 200, 300 ml bottles, they're still going to be ludicrously expensive. You're still going to have that sort of flipping problem.
I quite like Michael Bissett's suggestion that you should only sell Daft Mill to those that take their empty bottle back.
Yeah, there's a few ideas which could work. It's just logistically they're basically impossible. If everything was sold via the distillery, we could do that. But you've got the fact that we retail across across the UK and around the world. So yeah, it's tough. All I can say is that Daft Mill and the brand manager, we're all very, very keen that the stuff is affordable. So when it is released, I think £95 for the standard release for this is super reasonable. And what I would say is, that's expensive for a 12-year-old whiskey, but if you want to look at percentage margin on cost of goods of production, I can guarantee you, a £30 bottle from a really big producer, they're making a huge percentage margin because their cost of goods is going to be absolutely nothing on a litre of alcohol. But this is, single estate whiskey at a distillery that, fires up twice a year, 100 casks. The cost of goods of a litre of alcohol from Daft Mill is gigantic. I would guess it's one of the highest in Scotland in terms of cost of production. Maybe something like Dornoch is higher, but so I think we do sell at a reasonable price when it first comes out. But yeah, I mean, trying to halt the insanity of the secondary market is tough.
Yeah.
On that note, I've got some bottles. If anyone wants to buy them, private message me.
It's very generous of you. Will you do that by ballot? Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly.
and it's 100 quid to enter the ballot.
Exactly. Good thinking, Eddie. I haven't thought of that. Yeah, the new berries ballot is £200 to me on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to get across what a tiny production it is at Daffmill, and that is obviously transferred into the rarity of the product and therefore the cost, particularly on the secondary market. And it's a challenging one, because I know you, and I know Francis a bit, and I know that neither of you like to see Daffmill at the prices it's commanding on auction. You know, I think it's probably something that really eats you up inside, Johnny, if I'm honest. But
the fact they're not my bottles on whiskey auction, I hope over time that the thing will sort of die down a little bit, and we're releasing more Daffmill this year than we have before. As an extra batch going to America, so the batch sizes are increasing, the amount of batches are increasing, the amount of single casks are increasing. So hopefully, the more that comes into the market, the more we can do. I mean, the obvious sort of big brand thing to do is to push the RRP, and I think hopefully people appreciate that is not happening. And I really hope that people can see that Daffmill is not a greedy brand. Daffmill is not Daffmill's not profiting off the secondary market hype. It's the flippers, unfortunately.
No, yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think everyone's enjoyed the whiskey. I think we should stop talking about auctions and.
Indeed, yeah. Well, one thing I meant to say at the start, actually, I think it's possibly the first ever whiskey tasting where half the whiskey comes from the well-known whiskey region of Fife. Because if you're not from Scotland, you don't know Fife. It is bizarre. There were no distilleries in Fife until recently, until Daffmill, and then you've now got Lindor's Abbey, which is just slightly north. You've got King's Barn towards St Andrews. You've got Eden Mill, Inchdarney. Is there another, or is that? It's basically a little whiskey region in Fife now. Which I think is really cool. You've got all hanging together. But if you'd said 15 years ago there'll be a whiskey tasting with 1 from Isla and 3 from Fife, people would have looked like you were loony.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, really. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you're absolutely
right. I thought it was intentional, though.
Well, of course it was, yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
The hidden intentional character of the tasting. Anyway, Johnny, listen, it's been good. Thank you very much for that. And for the
thanks for having me, and again, apologies that I am not Francis.
Well, I'm sure there's benefits to being Francis and not being Francis. So
I'm not sitting in a combine harvester at 10:30 on a Friday night. So
yeah, anyway, I need to get Anthony on, because I feel like I'm keeping everyone waiting. And but thanks, Johnny, that was great. Hoping that Anthony can hear me. Anthony, Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, Eddie. Yeah.
Are you still with us?
I'm still awake, yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for waiting so patiently. Just to give you a little intro and hopefully not embarrass you too much, but I met you obviously at the beginning of the story at Kilhoman back in 2005, and we perhaps didn't hit it off straight away, but I'd like to think that since then we've made up for it. But from my perspective, and I'm pretty sure from many of the new guys as well, that you're very much a trailblazer. And Kilhoman, for those of you that don't know, started distilling in 2005 at a time when single malt whiskey perhaps wasn't quite as fashionable as it is now. So I know that you've got some very interesting things to say about starting up a distillery and all that kind of stuff. But it's great to have you on, Anthony. But please do tell us about Kilhoman and about the Aqua Bay.
So anyway, Daffmill and Kilhoman started at the same time. Daffmill and Francis took a completely different route to market and how they perceived the distillery as we did, and we both kicked off in 2005, and we took a very much a more commercial decision, and clearly we needed to try and get Kilchoman to market as soon as we could, really, bearing in mind that we wanted to make sure that the whiskey was going to be enjoyed, and because if you get it wrong the first time around, that never sets you off on the right path. So and Francis was clearly just wasn't really making any decisions really about how much whiskey he was going to make and when he was going to release it. And I loved his attitude, because we need more people like that in the industry. And it's fantastic. Francis is a great guy. He's been over to Isla a few times, and we've had a few beers together. And I love the way he's doing things. But we didn't have that option. We didn't have a quarry just around the corner that could produce the money that allowed him to make a choice about when he was going to release his whiskey. But more importantly, we also wanted to produce commercial quantities of whiskey. And the question earlier about whether Wolfburn or Kilchoman were similar size, I mean, I think you can only look at size in terms of production. You know, size of stills plays a part. But when we set out, it was about 100. We set out to produce 100,000 litres of alcohol. Why did I decide that? That was really, Edredar was a similar size, and they were the smallest distillery in Scotland. And I thought that had a uniqueness about it that could stand us in good stead. So that's why the distillery was built in that way. We decided to go for a point of difference. We didn't think there was any point in building a distillery similar to every other. We therefore went the farm distillery route and took whiskey back to its traditional roots. Based on a farm, we grow some of the barley, we malt it on site, we produce it, we warehouse it on site, and we do bottle it all here on Isla. And I think when we started, we were looked upon as pretty bloody crazy, to be honest with you. There weren't any new distilleries being built. And it's fantastic now that there's so many distilleries, not only in Scotland, but around the world being built. And I've fortunately met a lot of those who've come to Kilchoman to learn how not to do it, actually. Because, you know, clearly I didn't have too many people to go and ask about what to do and what to look out for and what not to do. So we really was a seat of the pants job, though I was very, very fortunate, as a number of the distilleries who've been presenting tonight had Jim Swan as part of the team, and he held my hand right the way through in terms of setting up the distillery and making sure that we had everything in the right place, and that we were producing the spirit that I was looking to achieve in terms of character. And all I did with Jim was tell him that I wanted a fruity, upfront fruity whiskey that could mature relatively quickly. And that was it. That was it. We met in Edinburgh one day back in 2002-03, and I said, look, just go away and design a distillery. Basically 100,000 litres would be about right. But we soon found out we could produce more if we put more washbacks in. And we soon managed to increase production with the same set of stills, with putting 4 washbacks in. We got up to 230,000, 240,000 litres about 3, 4, 5 years ago. And we were fortunate. And, you know, you make your own luck in this world, but when we started, the whiskey boom was just kicking off, and independent bottlers were doing a great job in raising the bar and raising people's aspirations to drink better whiskey, and independent bottlers were reaping the rewards in putting out cask strength single casks from distilleries all around Scotland. And so when we came along and set up a distillery on Isla, and I chose Isla for one main reason. Isla was a key region in the boom for single malt whiskey, and I felt that I could ride on the back of their success in a way, on the success of the other major brands here on Isla, and that actually stood me in very good stead, because whiskey clubs and whiskey enthusiasts were really sort of just leaning towards Isla style of whiskey at that time, where, you know, 15, 20, 30 years ago, Isla whiskey was viewed as pretty medicinal and strong and really not very approachable. But as we started there was a huge wave of interest. And as soon as I announced that we were building the distillery, I had emails from all over the world about, what we were doing and how we were going to do it, what style we were going for, and all the rest. So when we did launch, and we did launch our first whiskey at 3 years of age, 8,000 bottles at £45 a bottle, they sold out in 2 weeks. And we've just taken it from there, really. And I'm overwhelmed with where we've got to, in a way, because I never imagined it when I risked everything. And I assure you, as Eddie said, it's hugely risky to start a new distillery, huge amount of upfront money, and then a lot of waiting around to see, when you can actually release it. And then are people going to enjoy your single malt? So, you can understand why distilleries weren't built for, 60 or 70 years, because it was a hugely risky thing to do. But I'm a risk taker, and although a lot of people thought I was completely crazy and lost my marbles, I knew that there was a market out there. The difficulty was actually getting to that point where we could release it without actually going bust. And I think all the other presenters here will know how tough it is to start a new distillery, to produce whiskey for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years without any sort of meaningful income. And we had really, really tough times in the first 4 or 5 years. But ever since we've released it at 3 years of age, and now we've got whiskey in the warehouse, it's nearly 15 years of age, we are releasing older whiskies. But the old non-age came into being when we released. So it was fortunate that Macallan and Glenfiddich and others were starting to release non-aged whiskies. So it sort of it made it plausible, I think, non-aged whiskey, because ours was only 3 years of age. But we were definitely looking to build a brand, and so we then doubled production a year and a half, 2 years ago. We now produce just under 500,000 litres of alcohol. We're delighted with the sales around the world, and I have my sons in the business. It's a family-run business and independently owned, and my sons are in their 30s and are passionate about what I've put together, and are now really taking on the brand and taking it around the world. And I'm really based back at the distillery, looking after all the cask maturation and looking after all the development, because we built a new visitor centre as well just before the pandemic. It was great timing, that. I think everybody who's been presenting tonight should be very proud of what they've achieved. I know exactly what they've all been through, because unless you've done it, unless you've been involved in a new distillery business, you can maybe have an inkling about what it's like. But when you actually work for a distillery that started from scratch, it takes a lot of guts and a lot of determination to get everything right, put it together, and then take it to market. So I have a huge amount of respect for all those that are presenting tonight, because it's a huge effort that it takes, and I wish them all the greatest success, because I know that I didn't actually have a dram to try of yours, because Eddie managed to fuck up that. But I mean, bless Eddie. But I'm sure I heard great comments about the whiskies. So and I have tasted the King's Barnes, and I know Daft Mill, because when Francis was over here, he bought his first release, and then he sent me every release since. And his whiskies are fantastic, and I love the way he's done things. And it's great that Strathern is now in the safe hands of Douglas Lang, because they have a great view and a great strategy, and they'll make a great difference to where Strathern goes in the future. And I know the Weems family, and I know how well they're doing, and they've been over here, and Drew came over here at Lindor's. He came over to see me as well. So it's great to see these distilleries getting to market and having the success, because it takes a lot of guts to do what each of these distilleries have done. And I'm delighted to be presenting them. It's been interesting listening to all their stories. So Mackie Bay is our core expression, our everyday, most competitively priced, and you know, we're looking at the prices of Daft Mill. I think my advice to Francis is make more bloody whiskey, and then get more of it out on the market, and then you wouldn't have the flippers that will flip it all the time because you've got your releases are so small. And I think because Kilchoman and Daft Mill start at the same time, we're releasing much bigger quantities, and we don't necessarily have the same issue on price and flippers. I think we do with our limited releases, because we do these limited releases, and I'm sure that will show. But with our Mackie Bay, which is really driving our sales at around 45 pounds a bottle on the shelf, you know, that is what we're trying to do. Build a brand around Mackie Bay, which is 90% matured in first fill bourbon. All that fruit forward we get from these first fill bourbons we buy all from Buffalo Trace Distillery in Kentucky, and then 10% Oloroso sherry cask, just to give it a bit of weight and a bit of depth of character. Now this is 4 or 5 year old and a little splash of 6-year-old in it. We can't talk about that particularly, and we don't put an age statement on it. And each year we're just trying to raise the bar in terms of maturation for Mackie Bay, so that eventually it'll get up to more like 8 or 9 years of age moving forward. But that will take a bit of time, because we've been releasing whiskey since 2009, so now 11 years. In our first year, we only produced 50,000 litres, and so, you know, we have to be careful with our stocks and not delve too deeply into those stocks. So we keep Mackie Bay at that young, vibrant, youthful level still, and we're very fortunate. There's a lot of sweetness, a lot of citrus, a lot of lemon notes, and soft integrated peat smoke at the back of the palate. It's Isla style, but it's not a sledgehammer of peat in terms of some of the Isla whiskies. So we're a gentler style of Isla whiskey, though the ppm, because everybody loves to talk about parts per million of phenols in the whiskey, which is at the malting stage, we're the same as Ardbeg in terms of, we're right at the top, 50 parts per million in terms of the standard releases from Isla. Ours is high, and we buy all our malt, not all our malt, but 70% of our malt is from the commercial maltings on Isla, and we buy the same malt specification as Ardbeg at that higher peating level at 50, and then the 30% is produced from our own barley that we grow on the farm where Kilchoman is situated, and that's what we malt ourselves and distill, and that's around 10 to 20 parts per million of phenols. And for those who tried the 100% Isla, we call our flagship expression, because we're very proud of our farm distillery roots, you know, from barley to bottle. It's a much lighter, fresher, more zesty character than our commercial malt, which all our other releases are produced from. But Mackie Bay to me is the DNA, has already been talked about by the other presenters. We do fill mainly into bourbon because it works so beautifully well, and we do fill quite a lot of Oloroso sherry for Miguel Martin. We buy all our sherry hogsheads and mainly butts, but we filled a whole raft of different casks, experimental cask types, and Peter was talking about the SDR casks, shaved toast and recharred, and we did a release of 100% matured in shaved toast and recharred casks, and I presume when he talks about Portugal, he's talking about our friends from Dias Cooperage, is he? I'm sure if he nods, he probably. Anyway, I mean, we filled. I'm now more interested in the provenance of the casks that we're buying. So rather than just buying port casks or Madeira casks or red wine casks, we're looking to get more provenance from those casks, so we can talk about where they came from. So we bought cognac casks, we bought Calvados casks. I've just filled some tequila casks, and these are very small quantities that we fill into these casks, and we do releases of these on a regular basis, because I think casks are a huge influence on the whiskey that you eventually drink. And I'm now talking a lot about yeast varieties at the other end, yeast varieties at the spirit cut point, different yeast will produce different characteristics, and different cut points also produce a different characteristics. Long fermentation, short fermentation, all these things. Now we can go on and talk about these things until we're sort of getting fairly bored. But I think at the end of the day, we're not selling the spirit. Well, we're really trying to create a brand of single malt whiskey. So once it goes into a cask, although it might have all sorts of different characteristics at the cut points, the spirit cut points, once it's been in cask for 5, 10 or 15 or even longer, then all those characteristics are going to be sort of submerged in the influence from the cask it's maturing in. But I think as an independent distillery, we're all talking about these things because we need to be engaging with our consumers and showing that we want to do things slightly differently. But we all distill in the same way. We're all doing that. We're using different yeasts. We're all using different cut points, and we always all produce a different spirit because, as Murray and Peter and Mark were saying, it's the DNA of each distillery in Scotland which creates something unique and different from every distillery around Scotland. And I think that is what's so unique about single malt Scotch whisky, and which will continue to drive the success of the category, because we've all got a different story to tell. Because whatever we try and do and replicate a lowland or a highland or a Speyside, it's the DNA of the distillery and what we do in our distillery that creates our own uniqueness, which is so special. But I hope you enjoyed the Aqua Vitae. I thought it was better to let you try the Aqua Vitae because it's something that's always available and you can always purchase. We do the limited releases, obviously, of various cask types, and the 100% Isla from our own barley we release once a year, and that is coming up for release in September. And I won't drone on because otherwise I'd go way past my slot. But thanks very much for your time, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Anthony. That was very good, very good. I'm sure lots and lots of comments and questions. I'm probably just going to have to cherry pick. I think the best of those. Otherwise, we will be here all night. One of the questions was, how much malted barley can you malt as a proportion, currently versus what obviously you've got the new buildings and the ability to malt more barley than ever before. What would be your aim in terms of proportion?
Well, we're trying to get it closer to 30%. We grow around 250 tons of barley, our own, and we're trying to get more of 100% Isla released because it's so special to us, and it really sort of is the signature Kilhoman, and that's why we built the new malt floor and doubled the amount that we could produce from 2 tons to 4 tons, and we will grow more if we feel. But I reckon at the moment it's about sort of 75-25, 75% commercial malt and 25% of our own. Yeah. I wonder, obviously you've very successfully expanded the distillery in the last couple of years, which is, it's just wonderful to see you progressing and evolving. But obviously, the more whiskey you sell, the more commercial pressures and all that kind of stuff. Does that have an impact on, things that some people might see as a frivolity, as in having your own maltings, your own floor malting? We're fiercely independent. We don't have. I didn't build this distillery to build it up and sell it to the highest bidder. That's for sure. So anybody has that notion, can kiss that goodbye, because Kilhoman is not for sale at any price. I have flogged my guts out for the last 20 years to get where we are, and now I'm going to leave it in the capable hands of my 3 sons at some point. And if they dare to sell it in 40 years' time when I'm 6 feet under, then I'll come back to haunt them. So I think, look, I set out to do this because I had a passion and a love of wanting to do something different, and I've always done that throughout my career. And I never imagined we'd be in this position we are now. Look, I could have easily done what Francis did. I love the way he's doing things. I think it's fantastic. But I didn't have that option. We went the commercial route, and I want to leave a legacy for my kids to enjoy and to take to the next stage. I think that's hugely important, that there's more independent distilleries now in the industry than there ever were before. If you look 20 years back, it was run by three massive businesses, Diageo, Chivas, and Bernard. So now the independents have a voice, and a very strong voice at the premium end of the single malt whiskey market. And that's how it should be, because the big companies aren't able to devote the time and the energy at that end of the market. Although, having said that, Diageo are now, spending £35 million on resurrecting Port Ellen Distillery and Brora Distillery, and that's fantastic, and I get that. But that is not what they're about. They're about shareholder dividend and growing Johnny Walker around the world. It needs the independent distilleries like the ones you have on today and all the others to really fly the flag for the premium end of the market and give the consumer the choice of other single malts, which we're making fantastic whiskies. And why would you go and buy, something from Diageo, a single malt from them, when we care about our whiskey a lot more? I'm not saying they don't care, and they make very good whiskey, but I think the independent distilleries have that passion that maybe the bigger distilleries, they don't have the time to devote to that side of the business. And so I'm delighted that there are so many new distilleries that have come in and are doing a great job. And it was a bit lonely 15 years ago. Now, there's a huge number of distilleries that are coming to market, and more the merrier.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Lots. Someone said Anthony for Whiskey PM. Would you accept that role?
I'll take over Nicola's job if you like. Yeah.
Obviously you've been doing this for some time now, and I mean it's a shame in a way we haven't got Francis here as well, because we could have asked him similar questions. If you could go back in time to the point where you were considering building a distillery, and perhaps in the throes of building a distillery, is there anything you'd do differently? Is there anything you'd tell your ever so slightly younger self or advise them?
You want to ask all these other guys what I told them when they came over. I definitely told them how not to do it, because we made all the mistakes you could possibly make. Blew up a boiler. I bought a second-hand boiler because I couldn't afford a new one. It blew up within eight months. All the steam pipes burst because we didn't have the right diameter of pipes. I could go on and on and on and on about what went wrong. I think the beauty of the distilleries that are now starting is that they have someone to go and talk to about it and understand it a lot better than I did, because Jim Swan wasn't able to sort of say, don't do it this way, don't do it that way, do it this way. He was able to design the distillery for me, and then he left me to sort of get on with it. I think now, would I do things differently? Yeah, I might have done gin, but I'm glad I didn't, because it makes such good economic sense to have an income stream with gin or rum or vodka or whatever. But I'm glad I didn't, because I think it meant that we concentrated on building Kilchoman single malt brand, and there was no distraction. But it makes absolute sense to launch a product that you can take straight to market on day one and have an income stream, and then let things settle down and then concentrate on the release of your single malt. So yeah, I understand that completely, and we did toy with it, but I think in a way I'm quite pleased we didn't eventually, and we stuck to our guns and just stayed with single malt.
Yeah, I suppose the temptation possibly wasn't quite as great as it would be now, because obviously the gin bubble hadn't quite blown up at that point.
I mean, I think it was always going to be a difficult one. I think the brands that will succeed and are succeeding are the ones that have a route to market, and maybe have the resource, money to put behind the brand. I think is hugely important. And the smaller brands that maybe just came in because they thought it was a good idea and probably don't have the marketing experience and the route to market sorted, they're going to struggle now that the gin bubble not burst, but it's certainly sort of flattened out. You look at the Botanist gin here on Isla. Without Remy behind it, it would have struggled to get to the next stage. And now Remy have come in and pumped money behind the brand, and they've gone from strength to strength. So gin is a very difficult, and don't get me started on gin. I just feel very fortunate. The Single Malt Scotch Whisky Association, we have such stringent regulations. It stands us incredibly good stead going forward because there's no grey area. With other spirits, rum, gin, there are grey areas, and I think we might whinge about the regulations, but they stand us in very good stead because it's very, very clear about what we can and cannot do.
Yeah, I won't get you started on gin because I'll just get started on gin. And
I will have a beer and I'll talk about gin. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, listen. Thanks very much, Anthony. I'm going to unmute everyone, all the other presenters as well now, and see if we can have a lively discussion for a few minutes before we finish. If I think Johnny even in the room? Yeah, he's there.
I've just got back out of bed, Eddie. It's okay.
Good. Am I missing Murray?
The right side this time, Johnny. Hope it's the right side.
Is that now? Oh, wrong Peter. So, is there anything any of you would like to ask each other, first of all? No.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to ask sort of Anthony there, like, I was in a really unfortunate position that I never got a chance to meet Dr. Jim Swan. So he's had such a big influence on everything that I now have to talk about with Lindor's, and like the sort of, I guess, the legacy he's left behind for Lindor's, but I never had a chance to meet him. So like, what was he like as a guy?
Well, he was a very understated, very modest, and a delightful individual who never shouted about his prowess or his knowledge. He was not someone who put himself forward to be Mr. Whiskey. He just got on with his job because he was very, very good at it, very experienced, and just a delightful individual, an absolute charming guy who was hugely, hugely knowledgeable about his subject, but never, ever shouted about it. He was a qualified chemist, and he knew his cask maturation policy was probably the thing that really started him off in terms of understanding cask maturation and what works and what doesn't work. And he came up with a shaved, toasted and recharred recipe, and he developed that with Diaz Cooperage in Portugal. And now everybody's all the Cooperages are now jumped on the wagon, which you would do if something as a success as it was. But that sort of thing that Jim did, and he never ever trumpeted about it or boasted about what he'd achieved, because I was very fortunate to have him on board when I did, because he introduced me to Buffalo Trace Distillery, he introduced me to Miguel Martin, he introduced me to Diaz. I have a huge debt of gratitude for Jim. He set the parameters for distillation, and he was really what allowed me to release Kilchoman at a young age and have some success from that. So yeah, I mean, I have nothing but praise for the man. We became very good friends. He used to visit quite regularly to Isla in the initial years, and he used to come and stay at my house. It was very sad. He was as busy as he ever been in his life, traveling the world and putting people straight on their distilleries or helping them right from the word go. in the most understated way. So yeah, I was very sad when he died, and I'm sure a lot of other people were as well. But I think we, and Lindor's especially, will have a huge amount of gratitude that they knew him and he could help them out in the initial stages.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would second all of that. I was very lucky to spend a bit of time with Jim, and yeah, a scary amount of knowledge but most of all passion for what he did. You know, he was like a child, very excited about doing what he did. And I think the way I remember him is the Bobby Robson of the distilling world. Very, like you say, understated, quietly confident that he knew what he was talking about, and you absolutely knew he knew what he was talking about.
I would certainly echo that as well. I mean, Jim was involved with Kingsbarns from the beginning as well, and I only met him a handful of times, unfortunately, but I found him to be a very softly spoken man. But when he spoke, like, folk listened. Everyone in the industry knew him, and he had some cracking stories as well. He would tell, but in a very softly spoken way. There was no ego. Yeah, I didn't realise the impact that he had in the industry until he actually died, and then everyone was talking about what he did, what his life's work was. It was, yeah, something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's.
I think it's worth saying as well that he was actually involved in Daftmill. I mean, which, you know, I think kind of goes to show kind of the extent of his influence on just the new distilleries in general. You know, I mean, I would have met the guy once, and again, I echo exactly what the other guy said. But yeah, the fact he was involved in Daftmill and also Kingsbarn and Kilholman, you know, it's and it goes across the globe as well. You know, to Wales, to Taiwan. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick question for Anthony, particularly. Have you watched the TV show Succession?
No. Should I?
No. I'm just thinking that, you know, obviously you and the boys and the eventual handing over of the business, you should watch that show. It's on
they're not getting rid of me for a while, that's for sure.
No, well, you should definitely watch that show. You'll get it as soon as you see it.
Okay.
And then a slightly more whiskey question for Anthony. What makes your malt so distinctive from other Isla whiskies? Is it the fermentation or the maturation, would you say?
I think it's a combination of size of stills, because I think they copper contact and tall narrow necks. I think the spirit still does play a part in the character, because if you have wide, shorter neck, you're going to collect heavier alcohol and more pungent style. So we have a boil bulb and tall narrow neck, and it's small, so there's more copper contact. And fermentation, we have longer fermentation than any of the other distilleries. I believe most of them are around the sort of 58 to 65, 70, and we're average about 90 hours now. And I think that helps. We go for clear worts. So we're always very particular about the worts, which Jim always told us, and our cut points are quite narrow to produce that fruit forward whiskey spirit. And I think that sets us apart, but obviously the peating levels, you know, we've gone for a high, and I'm never driven by peating levels. Everybody likes to talk about it, but when you consider that probably the most pungent Isla whiskey is probably Lafroig in terms of the sort of characteristics, and they're at 35, 40 ppm, and Ardbeg and Kilholman are at 50, but it doesn't really play a part in the style. I think the great thing here is the 9 distilleries, and we're all producing something slightly different, but they are distinctively Isla in their character, that salty, iodine sort of peaty style.
Yeah. One question from Facebook from a Mr. M. Watt, who you might be aware of. Is there still no chance of a cask for bottling?
God, he's not still bloody asking, is he?
Of course he is.
Yeah, Mr. Watt. Yeah, no, Mark. Well, you can keep ringing me up, but you won't get any success. That's for sure. No, we don't. We don't sell any of our casks to independent bottlers.
Yeah.
I would opt for a longer established independent bottler anyway. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but
But you've got enough on your plate trying to market Daffmel.
Exactly.
yeah, it's tough job.
Yeah, tough job.
Actually, I was going to ask those of you that, well, everyone, but those that particularly not owned by an independent bottler, which is I think half of you. You know, what's your feeling about independent bottlers? And you know, would you, Anthony? You're fairly it's fairly well documented that you're not keen on the idea of selling casks to independent bottlers. But what does everyone else feel about it? Johnny, what about Daft Mill? Are there any plans for any indie bottles?
No, we've spoken a lot about it, and I would really hope that berries are the first to do it. But Daffmill won't. But one thing I would say is a kind of preamble. I think it's quite interesting. In Scotland, there's kind of a view that independent bottlers are like piggybacking on a brand, and I can see that. It's quite interesting. We've been looking at world whiskies and other pretty well-known, well-established distilleries around the world that we're looking to buy from. Are seeing it much more as like a marketing tool. They're like, oh, well, wow, we can get bottled by, not saying berries have a kudos that others don't, but you know, a well-established independent bottler. This is a good marketing tool for us, and it's quite a juxtaposition to the Scottish view in it, I think.
Yeah. Mark, what about Wolfburn's stance on indie bottling?
The guys have been quite vociferous in their response. No to any independent bottlers, and no to any folk that want to sort of put any blends out there. But you know, business is a fickle thing. You know, you never say never. You've just got to look at, you know, how the business is going and what your opportunities and where they lie as well. But they're, you know, all credit to them if they can do that. And we don't need, and we remain loyal to ourselves and our strategy. You know, it's a personal thing. You know,
yeah.
You don't give your spirit to anybody else. It means that you have supreme control over what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. Peter, what about you guys? I know obviously you have your backers are an indie.
Yeah, Sweems Malts. Yeah. Echoing what Mark said, really. We have no plans to do any indie bottling, even through Weems Malts. You know, we're quite a small distillery, and you're retaining a lot of control over the quality of your product. The last thing you want is for some of your casks to get out and then someone to put them in some fairly ridiculous casks, and that would bring down the brand. So yeah, we don't have any plans. I mean, we're only filling 34 casks a week as well. We're not big, 200,000 litres a year. I think there's certainly a place for independent bottlers. You know, I really enjoy a lot of different whiskies from indie bottlers, and it's a place where you can find something slightly out of the ordinary to maybe a distillery bottling. So no, there's certainly a place for them, but we don't have any plans to do any Kingsbarns through indies.
Not even through the Weems.
Not presently. I mean, you never know.
Never say
could
never.
Find that maybe that would be an interesting thing to do a wee bit further down the line. So exactly, never say never.
Yeah. Murray, do you?
We have a fantastic family of private cask owners at Lindor. So private cask ownership is a big thing for Lindor's Abbey Distillery. But in terms of independent bottlers, companies, it's not anything that's been massively discussed yet. I don't think it's on the remit of plans for things to do. But we do have a fantastic variety of people from all over the world who have purchased their own private casks with Lindor.
Guys, it's 11 o'clock, so I think we've had your time for long enough. It's been thoroughly enjoyable, and really appreciate all of you giving us your time and your whiskey, obviously. And I personally obviously wish you all well for the future, and the immediate and the long term. Keep doing what you're doing. You're fighting the good fight. Each and every one of the spirits and the whiskies that we've tasted this evening, I think, are spot on. You know, there's nothing wrong with any of those whiskies.